Welcome. Welcome, Mayor Kim Driscoll. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, everyone.
My colleague Zayda and I are going to be we're going to do our tag team interviewing
Great
today,
afternoon.
kind of trading off back and forth with some different questions. But just to start out, that kind of familiar question is, tell us a little bit. Take a few minutes to tell us who you are and why you're running. And then for 15 minutes total for the interview, so keep that in mind as you're answering questions. But yeah, take it away. Who you are and why you're running.
Thank you, Jonathan. And thank you to all of you for carving out time to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity to share with you a little bit about who I am and why I'm interested in running. You know, I really feel like I'm Mayor Kim Driscoll, Mayor in Salem, Massachusetts, just elected to my 5th term. I'm running for Lieutenant Governor because I really want to work on issues that matter and make a real impact. That certainly is what has driven my desire and interest in being mayor. And I think as Lieutenant Governor, in addition to being the chair of the Governor's Council and the Lieutenant Governor's Advisory Council, I really want to amplify the issues of cities and towns across the Commonwealth and be their partner and their advocate. As mayor, I've been on these front lines, leading on issues ranging from COVID response and recovery, climate action, housing affordability, racial justice, and public education. As mayor, I also chaired the Salem School Committee. In fact, we just had our retreat this morning. I'm leaving a 3-hour retreat with a group of school committee members who are pretty dedicated, working for our kids. I really believe that local government is responsible for the things that people rely on most from government. Educating your kids, keeping your neighborhood safe, investing in those favorite places where you make memories, parks, beaches, downtown squares. What we do locally has a big impact on our Commonwealth, and how our Commonwealth interacts with our communities has a big impact on what happens locally. As we come out of this pandemic, I really want to bring my know-how, my experience, my skills to collaborate with communities and ensure we rebuild, recover, and reinvest in an equitable and inclusive Commonwealth. It's certainly not lost on me that we live in a Commonwealth, not a state, right? There's not a legal distinction to that. But we do know that Commonwealth is meant to do good, to bring people together with the idea of improving the lives of everyone who lives here. My hope as Lieutenant Governor is I can work on improving the lives of everybody who lives here. It's what drives my values and my enthusiasm for the work.
Thanks so much, Mayor Driscoll. Appreciate it. And living in Malden, Salem is one of my go-tos, except during Halloween, because I just can't. I'm not a native, so I don't know my way around the back roads like I'm sure you have to if you live there. My first question, and it kind of, again, people are probably getting tired of hearing this, but I'm just going to keep banging this drum. I did a lot of work during the pandemic on mutual aid, and gathered with a lot of my neighbors because I saw how much our government was kind of lacking in a rapid enough response. Mm-hmm. So my question to you is, how would you evaluate the state's response to COVID-19, and what would you have done differently? And how can we assure that the next time something like this happens, what policies or ideas would you bring forth to prepare us better?
Yeah, just want to write that down. So I think the state overall has had some things we've done really well, and some areas where I think many cities and towns felt a little alone and individualized. Certainly the ability to get people vaccinated at mass vaccination sites, given the rates that we're at, I think has been really strong. Clearly there are gaps in that. We're experiencing that for sure among people of color, individuals who don't have access to easy access to vaccine sites. But I think overall, we followed the science as a state. I think we worked hard to try and make sure that was what was guiding our way forward. Some of the things I would do differently, as I said, I think many local leaders felt a little alone. I know that we didn't wait to act on things like pool testing in schools, setting up our own testing sites, working to ensure that the most vulnerable members of our community we're getting food, we're getting access to broadband, we're recognizing that they had a community of neighbors around them. We organized 500 people through Salem Together to ensure that neighbors knew who neighbors were, and we were checking on each other. We set up a regional quarantine site, the cities of Salem, Lynn, Peabody, and Beverly, like almost overnight, right? These were actions where local leaders really had to step in because frankly, there wasn't anybody else coming to do that work. We've also had to work individually on a number of policies. Right now, Salem has a vaccine requirement in place for indoor dining, indoor gyms, indoor entertainment areas. It would be a lot easier if we had a regional policy in place. I want to recognize that there's different things happening in different parts of the Commonwealth, but reporting out the health data going forward, I would say reporting out health data, being better prepared. There are 351 cities and towns, and there's almost that many individualized boards of health working at, and sometimes not as collaboratively as we need to. We need to invest more in public health. We need to make sure we're focused on prevention. We need to build those trusting relationships now. So when we're talking about vaccinations or testing or whatever the next public health challenge is, we're not trying to nurture those relationships at that time. We've already got them in place. We're working those muscles. That wasn't the case during this pandemic. And I also want to be clear, like we had to build and fly a lot of things. This was not easy. There was no playbook for this. So I want to acknowledge we did have a lot of strong partnerships from the state. There definitely was some gaps. And I think going forward, we want to make sure we're better prepared in how we communicate, who we have relationships with, particularly vulnerable members of our community, and ensure that we have the resources around prevention. And in my estimation, as much as we love the flexibility of operating locally, having some real ties that bind us when we think about metrics and tying that to action so that we're not dealing with, do you have a mask mandate? Do you have a vaccine requirement? And ensuring that we're thinking collectively about health. COVID doesn't stop at any city or town line, and we really need to make sure we're approaching our solutions to it like that.
I agree. The patchwork is crazy.
Yeah.
Very, very, very true.
I've had some morning revelry at my house who's not happy about a vaccine requirement. And it'd be a lot easier. There's safety in numbers when it comes to addressing a lot of these issues.
Indeed.
So talk a little bit about the office itself. How would you describe the office of the Lieutenant Governor to voters, and especially about how the office can be used to advance kind of progressive policies? And to focus on one specific role of the office, the Lieutenant Governor chairs the Governor's Council. Although often overlooked, the Governor's Council plays an important role in judicial confirmations, parole board confirmations, and pardons and commutations. And what priorities and perspectives would you bring to that part of the job?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think the Lieutenant Governor role, I know it's been hailed as somewhat undefined, but I actually think that creates an incredible opportunity. You definitely will need to partner with a strong governor. The fact that it will be a strong female governor is not lost on me, and I think there's an opportunity to collaborate in a strong way. I do think there needs to be a strong focus on our relationship with cities and towns, how we amplify that work, how we connect and ensure that policies at the state level are impacting cities and towns in a way that works for them and works with them. And sometimes that's a carrot, sometimes that's a stick, sometimes that's getting out of the way, but there is this symbiotic relationship. And I think it's really important in this role that you have somebody within the corner office who you know you can rely on and work with as we come out of this pandemic, tackling some of the toughest issues, all of which need a local touch. We're not going to solve the housing crisis without working in cities and towns to address affordable housing. We're not going to tackle climate change and certainly climate justice without working on the ground in cities and towns in that grassroots. And we're certainly not going to handle all of our needs within schools. That's probably one of the areas I'm most worried about, not just because I just came off the school retreat, but I think kids have been have had the biggest impact through this pandemic, been some of the biggest victims. We've gone through a really tough set of circumstances. We're not going back to what we used to do in schools. We're certainly not going to do what we're doing now. We have to come through this and transition to the next phase. And there are 260 odd school districts all doing it very differently. And right now, the people that we need engaged in thinking about what that next transition looks like, they're feeling like they just stormed Normandy. I mean, I was with a group of superintendents who are beat up, tired, and don't necessarily have the bandwidth to look above the treetops and think about what are we doing next September. That's a role where I think an active local lieutenant governor in concert with local officials is going to have your ear to the ground and understand there's nobody coming to do that work. Like, we're the cavalry that's got to stand up for what kids are going to need in September. And we need to put all things on the table. The same schedule that we're operating. Is that what we're going to be doing in September? How are we thinking about the teaching profession? I've got some of the best teachers in our district who are burnt out, feeling unsuccessful, and ready to give up on a profession. And that's not good for the next several years. So there's a role here, I think, for the lieutenant governor to really be a strong voice and collaborator with local government. But let me just get to your question with respect to the Governor's Council, because I think that's an important one as well. We do have a judicial nominating process, and we have a collection of governor's counselors who work in concert with the lieutenant governor who chairs that group to think about who is going to be serving on the bench, ensuring that we have a diverse pool of candidates, ensuring that people really know how they can apply for these roles. I think it's a little bit of an insider game at times, how to apply, how to ensure that we're setting goals and benchmarks, and that we're keeping score. I really feel like boards and commissions matter. When I came into office here locally, we wanted to open up that process. You shouldn't have to be a friend of the mayor or know somebody to join a board or commission. And it's the best thing we've ever done. We've got talent on our land use boards that frankly we couldn't afford to hire. And these are people who are giving back to our community, most of whom I didn't know, certainly before I became mayor, sometimes even after they're appointed, but they're giving back. And I think looking at these appointments, are we keeping track, not just on the governor's council, those are certainly important appointments, but there are a range of boards at the state level that we want to make sure represent our communities and represent our values. And I think tracking that, opening up the process for applying, and ensuring that we're intentional about that is really important.
Thanks so much. So a little kind of a softball question. Who are your political role models and why?
Ooh, good question. I mean, I go to Angela Merkel because I think she's been an amazing leader, very strong, savvy, avoids drama, has really led that European Union. I think we're going to miss her, right? So she's somebody that I would point to as, a person who is principled. I can't say that I know all of Germany's policies, but I think she's been a woman, and sometimes often the only woman in the room that has had to take on some courageous choices with regard to immigration, with regard to standing up to hate and bigotry. And I think she's done an admirable job of it.
Yeah, PBS just did a great documentary on her. So
I'll have to,
if you have time, check it out.
I will.
And then kind of, in a way, on a similar note, kind of what governors or lieutenant governors, either in Massachusetts' past or in other states, do you admire? And what would you seek to emulate about them, or which policy ideas of theirs would you want to introduce or build upon?
Ooh, Jonathan, good question. I mean, I'm fortunate to have been in mayor. As I said, this is my 5th term, so I was able to work with Governor Patrick. I never felt like we had an inspiration gap when he was governor. There was these visions that were put out, and then the blocking and tackling to try and achieve them. So he's somebody that I'm fortunate to know, and somebody that I think always gives good counsel. And I think led in a very value-driven way and built a strong grassroots team and organization. Let me think. To be honest, I don't know as many lieutenant governor candidates. I think that speaks to the position of it really is a team, right, approach. So I would point to Governor Patrick and really just, I think that whole value-driven approach to governing has been a part of the way I've led here in Salem. I wasn't born in Salem. I didn't grow up here. My dad was in the Navy. I was born in Hawaii. My mom was born in Grenada and grew up in Trinidad. We've lived in a lot of places. Like, I know what it means to be the new kid. And I think that has really, growing up in a bicultural family where you're not really in your same hometown has really driven me to think about what it means to be other, and how do we make sure we're looking out for someone who may not have grown up here, doesn't know all this, doesn't have all the same traditions and habits. I'm proud that we're raising my husband, Nick, who is 2nd generation bricklayer, proud member of Local 3. We're really glad to be raising our 3 kids in this community. I came here to go to college. I fell in love with my husband. I fell in love with the city, and I never left. And I'm hopeful that value-driven approach, to me, that's my North Star, how I think about this work. And I think we need that in state government for sure.
Okay, I'm gonna go with another softball question. During the pandemic, I know that I've kind of tried to find a place to center myself, to recharge my batteries, because like you said, it's just nobody's coming. We're the only ones, right? So I like to take a walk along the beach, or like to drive up to walk around Pickering Wharf when it's freezing cold, because there's nobody there, and window shop. Where would you go in Massachusetts to recharge your batteries? What do you
I hope you had a wharf rat when you were at Pickering Wharf. That adds to your walk. All right.
Absolutely. And then a picture with Samantha.
Samantha is not even from Salem. I mean,
I know
history, but she's here. People know her. For me, I'm a water gal. I really love the coast. I can't imagine not living on the coast. My favorite place in Salem is Winter Island. You should definitely check that out, add that to your list. It's an old Coast Guard seaplane station that's now a waterfront recreational park. We have a beach there that's called Waikiki Beach. And my kids think it's the only Waikiki beach, which I think is really funny. But I love the coast. We vacationed in P-Town. We vacationed in Block Island. Block Island's gotten way too unaffordable, or way too unaffordable for us. But we love the water. We love the coast, and that's where we typically end up. But I will say, having spent some time out in Western Mass, I just feel like your shoulders immediately detense, and you just feel like you're in God's country when you head out there. So we're fortunate, I think, in Massachusetts to have so many places that you can feel centered. During the pandemic, I started walking to work. I found that it was the only way that I actually got outside. There were these long days, COVID meetings. You all can imagine what it was like in these especially those early days trying to respond. And just that, 30, 35-minute walk to work felt like much needed in terms of getting your head straight in the actions that we needed to take.
So one very quick question and then our closing. So the very quick one, we've all gotten to spend far too much time at home during the pandemic. What is your favorite binge watch that you've discovered during COVID?
Oh, garbage TV has been my go-to. Nothing heavy. I think Schitt's Creek got me through COVID, right? I was late to that. And my mother has got me hooked on 90 Day Fiance, which I feel like I'm a voyeur in somebody else's life. But it is my parents are retired and live in Mexico. And it is the one thing that we can connect about. Did you see what so-and-so said, right? Absolutely apropos of nothing, but.
Nice. And then for the closing question, after you talk with a voter, how would you want them to describe you in one sentence?
Qualified, inspiring, and ready to lead.
Good choices. Well, I'd say, and before we kind of close it out, if somebody wants to learn more about you and your campaign, where should they go?
KimDriscoll.org. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity to talk with you. You know a little bit more about me and my bad habits of watching garbage TV. I'm grateful for the work that you do. It takes all.
You'll be surprised how relatable, I'm sure, 90 Day.
I am grateful for this time and all the work you're doing to help our Commonwealth. Make sure when we say all, we mean all. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And good